talk about the zero product property. And as we talk about the zero product property, it's important to understand exactly what that says. What the zero product property says is that if you have a product of two numbers, so A times B, we'll say, if you have the product of two numbers and that product equals zero, then either the A has to equal zero or the B has to equal zero, one or the other. We're going to start talking about, again, solving these quadratic equations. And so the standard form of a quadratic equation is just ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now, in a future lesson, we will go through and look at how to factor this. But when you go through and you factor this, what happens is you get what we're going to call the factored form. And that's what we're going to look at today is the factored form. And the factored form is taking this standard form of a quadratic equation and writing an equivalent equation to it by splitting it up. And so we're actually going to split it into the two sets of parentheses. And so let's just call this x minus 4, x plus 8. Now with these two sets, notice that when I take x minus 4 times x plus 8, it equals 0. What our zero product property says then is that if you're multiplying those things together and it equals 0, then either the A has to equal 0 or the B has to equal 0. So here we're saying that either x minus 4 has to equal 0 or x plus 8 has to equal 0. One or the other has to equal 0. The only way you can multiply two things together and get 0 is if one of them equals 0 there. So x minus 4 equals 0. I'm going to add the 4, x equals 4. X plus 8, I'm going to subtract the 8, x equals negative 8. These are my two solutions to the problem then. So as I looked at this, I'd have my standard form. These would be the two solutions to that problem. And so again, we'll work on getting from standard form to this factored form in the future here. But right now what we're looking at is how do we get from this factored form down to the actual solutions there. And you do that by, if you have multiplication, knowing that one of these has to be 0 in order for this to equal 0. So either x minus 4 has to equal 0 or x plus 8 has to equal 0. Now another type of problem that we could look at is what happens when we have something squared. So like x plus 8 squared equals 0. Well, that technically means x plus 8 times x plus 8, and that has to equal 0. Well, that means that either x plus 8 equals 0 or x plus 8 equals 0. What you'll notice there when we do that is you have the exact same equations here. So I'm going to subtract 8, subtract 8, subtract 8, subtract 8. And so as I look at that, I get x equals negative 8 for both of them. So that's my solution. There's just one solution on this particular one. If you think back to the graphing method, remember when we graphed these, what those look like. There were times where the parabola would come down and just barely touch the x-axis and then work its way back up. And so it just touched that one spot. That one spot would be negative 8 in this particular situation. On the previous example, it would have crossed it in two spots, and those would have both been the answer. One other example that I want to work through is just an example where there are multiple things, and maybe there's a number in front. So maybe we have like 5 times 2x minus 4 times x plus 3 equals 0. These things are all being multiplied together. So that means that one of them has to equal 0. Now, the 5 obviously cannot equal 0. 5 doesn't equal 0. 5 is 5. So that's not going to equal 0. So that means that we're still left with either the 2x minus 4 has to equal 0 or the x plus 3 has to equal 0. So we're not worried about the 5. The 5 is there. It's going to be 5 times whatever 2x minus 4 equals times whatever x plus 3 equals. What we're worried about then is if we're multiplying these three things together and getting 0, either the 2x minus 4 has to equal 0 or the x plus 3 has to equal 0. So I'm going to go through and solve, add 4, 2x equals 4, divide by 2, x equals 2. Or I could subtract 3, x equals negative 3. Now you can give your answer as 2 comma negative 3. Make sure you don't put parentheses around it. As soon as you put parentheses around it, it becomes an ordered pair, and that is not what we want. Okay. Now typically I talk about bacon, which comes from pigs, but today I'm going to talk about cattle actually. And so how did the farmer count the cattle? Well, he used his calculator. We'll talk to you later, guys.